So here we are, brothers. I'm Jim Taylor. I want you to know I'm honored to be here, to have a chance to share my story. You know, when we gather like this, we know that we speak from the heart, and we listen from the heart. It's the exchange the agreement of exchange that we've made with one another. We're spontaneous, and I want you to know I'm about as spontaneous as I could possibly be. I've changed this damn talk about 80 times since I got here. I don't think it's finished yet. And we're lean of expression. That's going to be my most difficult one. Because I'd really like to have a conversation. I'd like to have that exchange back and forth. And who knows, it may happen. But with that, it always takes longer. But I want you to know where my heart is. And so I'd like you to just pray, just as we're looking at each other, and even as these words are coming out, that you'd pray for me, that I would say what needs to be said. Because that's what matters. Inspiration lasts very short. I've seen it. I've given sermons for a long time, and I already know how long it lasts, Richard, till they get to the parking lot. Because I've watched them out there. That's how long it lasts. But transformation, that does something different. And that's what we're looking for. There's another prayer I'd like you to pray. Pray for me, the words that I might say, that are the words that need to be said. But pray for yourself too right now, that you hear what you need to hear. It might not even be in anything I say. In fact, it might even be what I don't say. It might be in something you see in a brother in your circle. Something that his posture or his eyes, his gaze, his demeanor, or you look across the room and you see someone or something. It's all here. It's all speaking all the time. And so we're inviting it to lodge right here in our hearts. So from this context, this kind of context where we are initiated men who are grounded in the language of initiation, that we're not in control. We're not that important. We are going to die. And it's in that context that we're exploring cultivating wholeness, the seasons of a man's life, this cyclical thing that happens to all of creation, and we're part of it. Cultivating wholeness. And like counsel, we're taking another turn into it, digging a little bit deeper into what's come before and what will come after. You've noticed that we're following this analogy of the growth process of much of nature from seed to harvest. Joel started us off talking about sowing innocence and wonder. This childlike expectation of finding joy and milking it in every moment. Jim Clark explored the theme of growing for us today, an adult conversation with nature, with creation. It's an adult conversation, being able to look out there and recognize. It seems we're the only ones out of sync. You know, the trees don't seem confused about being trees. You know, I've had the opportunity to travel just a little bit, and I've been to UK, and horses in UK act like horses in Texas. They're not confused about what it means to be, horses. But there seems to be this perpetual unfinishedness about us, this longing that arises in us to be the perfect man, the man that we were meant to be, and yet we resist it. We resist it. I'll be adding some thoughts this afternoon about pruning. And tomorrow, Belden will bring us home with this idea of harvest. That in our lives, there's a harvest to be had in this very moment. And if we don't have it, it will not be had. There will be other harvests. But the harvest that waits for this moment, that grape on the vine, unless it is cultivated and harvested, will wither and die. There's a harvest to be had. You might notice that all these words, cultivate, sow, grow, prune, harvest, they're all about engagement. They're all verbs. They all require action. We can imagine a great sweat equity involved in the cultivation of wholeness. What is required of you and me? It's a manly question. What is required of me? Like reaching for the check at the end of a meal. Have you crossed that threshold? I remember when it happened to me, it was something I didn't plan on. It was a bunch of younger guys, and found myself reaching for that check. And I was walking away thinking about that. Something had changed in me. The little boy that waited for someone else to pick up the check had just given way to a man who was ready to take responsibility and lean into that. I think it's what Damien was trying to say to us earlier, that we're men engaged in work. It's good work. It has deep deposits in every one of us. So reach for the check. Don't wait for someone else. We are men that do not expect to reap where we have not sown. We're doing work here. But you already know that, don't you? As you were planning for this gathering this weekend, I know that you came here with the notion that there would be work to do, that we wouldn't be playing bingo all weekend, right? Oh? At least that's what I told my wife. So I can throw out all this funny stuff I got in here that was meant to entertain you, right? I hope I didn't need that. You know, I don't just count on my hair to woo you guys. I got some funny stuff in here. Did you hear about the tree surgeon that fell out of the tree, broke his arm? Well, I gave away the punchline. He fell out of a patient. My uncle was going to be a tree surgeon, but he fainted at the sight of sap. You know what a tree's worst month of the year is? September. All right. So when my girls were little, we read every night. It was a thing I looked forward to most with them as sort of a ritual. And we read a lot of stories. And one of the stories we read was a little red hen. And one day the little red hen was out in the field and she was scratching around. She came across a whole bunch of wheat seeds. And she got an idea. She said, hey, I could take these seeds and till the ground and plant these seeds and cultivate the wheat that grows up, and I could make some wonderful bread for my barnyard friends and my family. And so she goes back home to the barnyard and she tells her friends there. The pig and the cat and the goose show up. She says, hey, I got this idea. And she tells them about the wheat seed and what she would do with them. And she said, would anyone here help me till the ground? And of course they said, no. We got other plans. We're going to lounge in the sun for the day. But she said she still thought it was a good idea, so she did. She went and did the work herself, planted the seed. And as time passed, the wheat began to grow up, and there was more work to do. It had to be watered. Insects kept off the vine, and she asked for help from her barnyard friends. And again, they said, not I, we're not interested. And the story goes on, and at each stage of this process of growth, of this wheat coming to harvest, she would ask for help, and none of the barnyard friends were interested. And so finally, she gets to the point where she actually has brought the wheat in and ground it to flour, and she's made the bread and baked it, and the smell wafts out into the barnyard. Well, guess what? All the friends came running. The story says they were ready to eat, but she said, I don't think so. I'm going to reserve this for my children. And the moral of the story is that every stage in the process of growth requires work and engagement. The moral of the story. Now, you know, let's just make this clear, none of them were starving. This wasn't about helping destitute people. This is about fat, lazy, trying to reap where they had not sown. You see? And so the moral is that every stage in the process of growth requires work and engagement. Nobody gets a free pass, and it's never done. I mean, have you ever found yourself kind of waiting for this boat to plane? You know, like one day this is going to get easier? I mean, I always thought I'd reach some place where it's kind of like me and Jesus, you know. Kind of arrived. Now I can just look down and wonder what's wrong with the rest of you people. But every process requires work and engagement, and without it there is no bounty to be had. Tilling and fertilizing the soil, planting the seeds, watering and tending to the needs of growth, pulling the weeds and keeping the insects and other animals from devouring the plant. And even in the harvest, there is work to bring it from the field to the barn to the table. And it's a good story for us. Cultivating wholeness will always involve that kind of work. It's rare that we will be able to really feast where others have labored and we have done little. When it comes to cultivating wholeness, we really do reap what we sow. So all these verbs: cultivate, sow, grow, reap, harvest, prune, harvest. Not everyone understands this idea of sowing and reaping. If we were to look at our culture, we would find that Wall Street, our politicians, the corporate culture, they're engaged in a whole different kind of mentality. They do expect to reap where they have not sown. They do expect to get much out of little. And oftentimes it's at the expense of anyone and everyone. It's a little boy. When I was a boy, I thought as a boy. And we have a whole culture that's lost its way. Get all I can all I get, and sit on my can. That's my plan. I'd like to have a bathroom this size someday. What's wrong with that? Arrogant and indulgent when I was a boy. It's why I keep finding myself drawn to this poem of Hafiz. Hafiz is a 14th century Sufi poet. He's a manly poet. When I read him, he reads me back. He lived about 100 years after Rumi, and he wrote about 5,000 poems in his lifetime. I find myself reading this every time I'm with men. So if you've been with me before, you've heard this before. But I promise you, he will read you again. Because he does me. I think it gets at this idea that I'm trying to begin with. The title of it is Tired of Speaking Sweetly. Love wants to reach out and manhandle us. Love wants to reach out and manhandle us. Break all our teacups. Talk of God. If you had the courage and could give the beloved his way, some nights he would just drag you around the room by your hair. I don't know why I like that so much. If you had the courage, brothers, and could give the beloved his choice, some nights he would just drag you around the room by your hair, ripping from your grip all those toys in the world that bring you no joy. Love sometimes gets tired of speaking sweetly and wants to rip to shreds all your erroneous notions of truth that make you fight within yourself, dear one, and with others on too many fine days, causing the world to weep on too many fine days, causing the world to weep. God wants to manhandle us, lock us inside a tiny room with himself, and practice his drop kick. There's some Tai Chi there for you. Still. The beloved sometimes wants to do us a great favor, hold us upside down and shake all the nonsense out. That's exactly what any elder looking at the little boys wants to do. just hold him upside down and shake the nonsense out. Because he needs it, and we need it. And the whole world, all of creation, it seems to be waiting and begging for it. Wake up. Wake up. Holds us upside down and shakes all the nonsense out. But when we hear he is in such a playful, drunken mood, most everyone I know packs their bags and hightails it out of town. Not here. Not in this place. Oh? I know so because I've seen you. I've held your gaze. I see men here. Men ready to do their work. Men ready to be fiercely vulnerable, to take risks with one another, to do that which is not common. But I imagine for us to get to this place, a little nonsense had to be shaken out. Yeah. Well, there we go. So see, we're telling the truth, aren't we? I remember when our church was praying away the unimportant, trying to prune ourselves to make room for an intention to be a place of refuge for those who most often are marginalized and overlooked in our society. Reaching out to folks like our brothers were talking about last night on the stage. To structure our church around the needs of the working poor, the hungry, the sick, the financially destitute, the disadvantaged women and children and senior citizens in our community, hospice patients, parents of family and friends of lesbians and gays. And when you start to budget your church around those kinds of values, things change. Suddenly, it's not all about the Sunday sermon and the bells and the lights and the whistles. In fact, a lot of our leadership was so tired by the time it came around to Sunday, they really had little left but just to pray. Imagine that. We were working all week out in the trenches instead of fine-tuning the really, really big show. You older people know what that is, don't you? I was really little. Slowly but surely, we had a trickle out of people leaving our church. So this man in his 60s, late 60s, comes to see me, and he's telling me, he's there to tell me he's leaving the church. And in many ways, venerable, many ways. But he missed it at this point. He came in and he said to me he was really angry, and this was in my early pastorate, and I was really intimidated. I mean, he was my senior, and I really didn't know what the fuck I was doing anyway, and I was pretty sure somebody was going to find out any day now. He comes in, I had short hair then, He comes into my office, those guys that say they had hair down to here last, I don't know what that means, but. So he comes in there and he said, I've had it up to here with love. He's really angry, and he said it really confidently. And I'm like, and he's looking at me, and he's shaking, and his neck is all red. He says, and I'm like, there's this long pause, like I'm supposed to say something. So I don't know exactly what I was going to say because he interrupted me, but I said, well, Jesus, there you go again. Every time we bring up something, you bring up Jesus. And he's looking at me, and I'm kind of like, that's all I got. That's the only card. It's like, it's Jesus. And he's sitting there and he says some other things, and I'm just kind of shell-shocked. I don't know what to do. And then he says this to me. The quintessential coffin nail in evangelical life. You hear this as any kind of pastoral leader, it's death knell. Do you know what it is, Pastor? Any pastors in here? I'm leaving. We're not getting fed, he said. I mean, there's not much of a comeback for that. I mean, when somebody, it's over. You know, that's all on me, you know. But somehow something in my naivete, my insecurity of being, was I really called out to be this, and could I really do it? Could I really deliver what these people needed to hear? Something happened when he said that to me. It was the wrong time, wrong place. And I said to him, I said, I'm going to make up a name here. Larry, how long have you been a Christian? 35 years, he said. Really and I know what I'm talking about. I know what it looks like to get fed. 35 years I've been a Christian. And I'm looking at him, I said, and you're a deacon, right? Yes, 15 years I've been a deacon. And there was a pause on my side this time. And I'm looking at him and I said, Larry, don't you think it's about time you picked up your own damn fork? Yeah. He left. When I was a boy, I thought I was a boy. Gentlemen, make no mistakes about it. Cultivating wholeness will always, every time, be more than just about you. Every time. And I told that story for two reasons. It illustrates that little boy attitude that's waiting around for everybody else to pick up the check, to feed me. You know, and it's okay if you're, 12 months old. I'm all ready to mash up your carrots. Gaga. I mean, that's good stuff. But if people are still doing that for a 10-year-old at the table, there better be something real wrong here. Because we're going to want to know why he's not picking up his own fork. But somehow that hasn't translated into the culture of a lot of religion. It hasn't translated where we call each other out. We call out men. And I really believe that Father Richard, when he was looking to build an eldering community, it was out of this awareness that we were not doing that. We had a community that was at a very low level of development, and a church that wasn't much beyond that. He can tell you tonight if that's close. But there's another part of this mantra. When I was a boy, I thought as a boy. Oh, we got to do better than that. When I was a boy, I thought as a boy. Now I'm a man. I live as a man. I live as a man. I live as a man. Over the years, I've had my own nonsense be shaken out. I was working on my third degree in theology. People would come over for dinner. My wife would invite these couples over, and they would ask some innocent question, about God. 2 hours later, their eyes are glazing over. And I'm still on and on about something. My wife would be kicking me under the table trying to get me to shut up. And I'd be looking, I'd give these, you know how you give your wife that look of, you better watch out. And so the people would leave, and we'd have this little kind of argument about it. So what was that all about? I'm like, this is serious. This is serious stuff. If people don't know about the eschatological wonders and the teleological what are they going to do? Thank God, I don't know exactly how. I can't remember. I wish I had an elder like you in my life to kick me in the ass, to knock me in the head to shake some of the nonsense out. But I didn't have it then, but somehow life communicated how absurd I really was. And I came up with this acronym, BIOYAJ. And I put it on everything. It was on my email address. I had all this. And all my buddies at seminary, they were convinced it was Greek for something like stand strong in the Lord, you know. But it was BIOYAJ, blow it out your ass, Jim. And by the way, that last letter works real good with other letters too. It was something that I wrote down because it went way below the skin, you know, down there deep, to not take myself so seriously. And it was some of the nonsense that had to be shaken out of me. Another deep pruning came in the area of my own road rage. For years, I couldn't back out of my driveway without going on high alert, looking for all the idiots, as I called them. And they always showed up. Surprise, surprise. Someone would pull out in front of me, and it was my job to notify them just exactly how stupid they were. So I'd pull up beside them, I'd give that parental stare. You know, I couldn't, you know, back then I couldn't cuss or anything. You know, I was a good Christian. But I'd give them that look, and, you know, I could point at them, sort of. Well, they gave me their own sign language. They just they bypassed that that first finger and went right to the second one. And I choked my steering wheel to death every day. I'd be so mad. I want to kill that guy. But you know, I'm a Christian. God, I will get that guy. If I could only get that guy. So every day, I made all these rules up, you know. I couldn't look out that window, you know, because I really wanted to get over this, I thought, for about 10 years. I kept saying every day, okay, today I won't do that. Mark my calendar from now on, because it was humiliating. You know, I'm like going into the ministry kind of thing. It somehow didn't fit. The rule, I don't look out that window, that didn't work. I'd be like, you idiot. I'm driving, I'm not looking, but you idiot, go ahead. I'm not looking. And then I drove the speed limit for a while. I thought that would help. They would just go around me. All the idiots would just go around me. They don't. You know what they do? They bird dog you. They're right on you down. It's like, I'm going to, I couldn't look in the rearview mirror, but what if I have a wreck? So I started listening to Christian music. That didn't work. Just so you know. I listened to classical music. That was the one good thing that came out of it. I fell in love with classical music, but it didn't save me either. I memorized scripture, you know, the righteousness, the anger of man does not work the righteousness of God. I quote stuff. I tried everything. All the tricks didn't work. For 20 years, I did that over and over and over. Killed my steering wheel. Then one day I found myself as a new pastor sitting in with a bunch of 12-steppers. Some long-time AA guys with chips that had multiple digits on it, and they were working on a 12th step. And it was so refreshing to sit with men who would sit there and tell me, honestly, real shit that was going on in their lives. It was the first time I'd ever heard it. And they didn't hold anything back, and I was desperate for it. But see, the only thing, they kind of had this rule that when the sharing went around, you know, you had no observers, you know. And I'm like, I mean, they're talking about real stuff. I mean, hard, harsh stuff, and then it's going to be my turn, and, you know, what can I possibly say? You know, this particular day, it was, what are you afraid of? And I was sitting there thinking, I'm young, in my mid-30s, thinking, well, I'm not afraid of anything. How about that? The only thing I could think of that I was afraid of is that something might happen to one of my 3 little girls. And I knew if I said that, that was it. It was over. They were kicking me out. And so fortunately, I had about an hour, there were about 12 guys before it would get to me. And I just kept racking my head. What am I afraid of? What am I afraid of? And finally, it hit me just like a wash. It washed over me that I was afraid every time I got on the road. Because I'd never thought of it that way. I always thought of it as I was just pissed off at all these idiots. Because I was driving right. I'm driving until I got really pissed off. And then I pity the poor fool that needed to see this and get that, because who knows what I would do to get to it. I thought it was self-righteous, that, that they would just drive right, then everything would be fine. This isn't about me. It's about them. And I was sitting there, and somehow, some way, that got pruned. And it washed over me, and I saw the absurdity of it. And I literally knew in that moment that I was not going to deal with this issue from now on. It was mystical. I wasn't quoting anything. I wasn't even praying. And it came. But I had longed for it. For a decade. At least a decade. I had longed for it. And I have to use radical language. It sounds charismatic, which I'm not, so unfortunately. But deliverance was the only word I could come up with. It felt like, somebody just delivered me. So I left that place, told the guys, left that place, and, of course, I have to drive the next day. And for quite a while, I was just really nervous, like, oh, please, don't let those demons come back. And I'm driving, and I'm not getting mad, and I'm not worried, I'm not looking, but I'm also, I'm just driving. And about 6 months go by, and of course I told my wife, and when all this stuff is going on, your wives are like a second Holy Spirit. You don't have that, Richard. They're right there all the time. They don't miss anything. Women are so, you hear women, they're always talking, they're going on and on about how we don't listen to them. They go on and on and on about it. My wife never says anything like that. Of course, I never heard her say that. But what she does is every time I was in the car and somebody, these guys, they're really big idiots. Somebody needs to do something about this. And she'd be over there. And she's right there. And I'd be like, what? She's not saying anything. But I'm like, what? So I told my wife I'd been delivered. Of course, now she's hawk-eyeing me every time we're in the car. So 6 months go by. I don't really know this, really. I don't remember. But I remember this encounter. All of a sudden, I feel the whatever that is, You know how they can let you know that something's wrong, and you say, what's wrong? Oh, nothing. But that is absolutely not true, And so I'm like, what? I look at what? She goes, I saw you back there. What are you talking about? Yeah, about 20 minutes ago, I saw you get really mad about that guy, that pulled out in front of us. And I'm sitting there, I'm driving, and my first thought was, I'm kind of, you kind of defensive, like, why did you do that? I don't even know what you're talking about. And then all of a sudden, the reality of what she just said to me hit me. 20 minutes ago, I was mad about some guy pulling out in front of me. And here I am driving, and I'm oblivious to it. And all of a sudden, this big old smile comes across my face, and I turn to my wife, and I say, yeah, I got mad like a normal person. Right? Because the goal never was perfection. Never. It wasn't about getting it right 100% of the time. It was finding a place that's normal, where life can find its way. I didn't chase that guy down. I didn't give him any parental stares, no lectures. I didn't want to kill anybody's steering wheel. And 20 minutes later, I was driving on. Pruned. Other areas of my life had been pruned that weren't so obvious, though. At least I didn't think so. Stuff that I kept hidden from everyone. Ruts and unhealthy ways of living and communicating with my wife. Any of you got that? I think there's a direct connection with the worst thing that ever happened to me and the worst thing that I've ever done. And most of those things have been reserved for my wife. The Enneagram teaches you that the worst of your disintegration is always reserved for those closest to you. And I took all the pain in my life, and just like Richard has taught us, that if we don't transform that pain, we will transmit it, and I transmitted it to her. She was closest at hand. I'm ashamed to tell you, I did it with gusto. 5 years into our marriage, we hit bottom. We were having a protracted fight, and she suggested that we call our pastor. And of course, I was all into the, I'm going to win this argument. I'm like, yeah, well, go ahead. Because I thought she would never do such a thing. I mean, I wouldn't do such a thing. I mean, I had an ego. It wasn't a big one, but I needed to protect it. And she went to the phone and she dialed, and I'm like, she's not going to dial it. She dialed it, and she's not going to talk to him. She talked to him. That was step one. I admitted my weakness and failure to control my anger and my pain, and I remember our counselor saying to Linda at one point, Jim may be the loneliest person I've ever met. And for me, it was like someone had opened a window and looked right into my soul. I felt alone, very alone. All by myself, and I decided I didn't like it. And in my ignorance, I reached out and I included everyone I could in my pain, not knowing that it was a pathway into healing. Men don't usually include others in our pain. We hide, we put on a brave face, we move ahead, we don't look back. But I was forced into the dark that Jim talked to us about in the last session. It was one of those blessed curses that makes humans unique among living creatures. Our ability to examine ourselves and find ourselves lacking, and to prune that which no longer serves us. Somehow I was able to accept all that pain and the unfinished grief, the father hunger that ate at me. It was simultaneously terrible and galling and humiliating and wonderful and freeing and full of hope. Rilke has a poem, Winning does not entice that man. Winning does not entice that man. That man grows by being defeated decisively by greater and greater beings. And all of that grief and all of that pain had to defeat me. In the end, I had to let go of those wounds, because if I didn't transform that pain, I would only create more pain out of that same wound. I found healing and transformation. The little boy needed to be let go. There's a man waiting in all of us to take the place of that little boy. I have a feeling there's a cyclical reality to that as well. The man showing up, taking the place of that little boy. I feel it this weekend, a sense of clinging to that which awaits me. Clinging to that which awaits me. All pruning, brothers, makes room for new growth. Pruning is not an end in itself. I actually wanted to talk to Richard about this idea that I had when I was thinking this talk. In my tradition, we've always talked about Jesus being sinless, and I just don't know if that has really helped us very much. Because it never was about sinlessness. It can't be. It's not perfection, it's love. And this is the dervish that I want to participate in, a circle dance with the best years of my life and my wife's life lying ahead of us in the context of love. A fierce kind of love, where all my faith is put into it, where all my hope is given to it, and where my love that I have flourishes into more of the same and enlarges like a laser, goes in and enlarges and enlarges and enlarges and grows beyond and beyond. That's what the pruning invites us into. And it's so large that infinity cannot contain it. Or maybe it takes infinity to contain it. Better way to say that. So we step into it, we prune, we let go, we move into, and it enlarges. I've been called on my time. Marianne Williamson says, our deepest fear, brothers, is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, and fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God, and your playing it small does you no good, does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shirking and shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. Did you hear that? As we let the light shine in us, we unconsciously give everyone else the permission and the freedom to let their light shine. Other men and women thrive in our wake. They thrive in our wake. They thrive in our wake. We set them free, and we find God in the midst of all of it. They thrive in our wake. All of creation thrives in our wake. We are generative man. And so we prune that which no longer serves us. Oh.